Hello and welcome to the Manifest Health Podcast. I am Tamar, your host, and I am so excited to be here and to be doing this, and thank you so much for being here and for listening. It's so funny because I started a podcast a few years back. It was called the Healing Solutions Podcast, SOUL Solutions. And I released the intro episode and I was so excited about it. I was so gung-ho about it. And I had the release date for, episode 1 after the intro episode. And I really thought I was going to go all in, and ended up being that I gave birth on the day that I meant to release the first episode. And then it just totally didn't end up happening after that. And now I just had another baby, my 5th child, 4 months ago. And after having my 5th baby, I've been going through this whole beautiful and wild and really difficult life initiation in so many ways. We could maybe talk about that whole story in another episode. And part of this initiation led me into really entering my most feminine era yet. And in this feminine era, there's really no room for working right now. And I had to shut down my business to just really completely 100% devote myself to my children, my family, my home. And it's beautiful because being able to do that, that's part of the whole initiation. Like I said, maybe we can get into that on another episode. But anyways, I got to this point now that I'm 4 months postpartum that, I still desire to give myself to the world in this way of supporting people and helping people heal. And, I've written so many different, what could be episodes for podcasts or what could be classes online or for a course or something, just different things that I have to say, teachings I have to say about healing from things that I've learned and from my life experiences. And I was like, why don't I just start doing a podcast? I have plenty of nights where I'm not ready to go to bed yet, and my husband's busy and my kids are sleeping and I don't really have anything to do. And this feels like such an aligned way of spending my time. And you get to also have these beautiful nature background sounds, which I hope you enjoy, and the occasional car driving by, because my little baby sleeps in our room, and the only other room I can really escape to would be a bathroom, and that just doesn't feel right. So I'm sitting outside in the beautiful fresh air with some extra sound effects. So, enjoy the natural sound effects. So what I want to share with you today is I have plenty of classes that I've written out, and I was at one point going to turn this into a course, and I decided not to turn it into a course because it turned into like 19 different modules, which is way too much. So perfect to use as podcast episodes, right? And it's really all about principles of healing. It's key principles that I believe are absolutely integral to the healing journey. So this episode 1, is going to be what I believe to be the most important, number 1 place to start, which, of course, is God. And I call this episode Ein Od Milvado, which means there is nothing which is not Him. There is nothing that is not God. And so I want to break down this concept because God really is the most important key in healing. So, like I said, the first principle of healing is developing a relationship with God. And you may have a different way of referring to God. Maybe it's source, maybe it's spirit, or the universe, or creator, him or her, however you relate. Absolutely use the language that is most authentic to you. For me, I am going to use the word God or Hashem because I relate to God in this way as a him, as my father, as my king. That's what works for me. And, there are actually many different ways that I relate to God, but this is the language that I use. So if how I speak does not resonate with you, just translate in your mind to whatever words or names you use. So developing this relationship with God is key, and fully relying on Him for your healing. And that doesn't mean not leaving it all up to Him. No, we absolutely have to do our work, but developing that trust in Him will make the journey so much easier, so much better, and so much more meaningful. Having that deeper understanding and trust that there is a higher power above us running the show is basically like having this incredible support available to you at all times throughout the journey. And for me, and what I see all the time for others, this is one of the main things, if not the main thing, that keeps us going on this journey, right? Because it can be so hard and excruciating at times. And sometimes that also means not being happy with God, and that's okay. We are allowed to express that to God. And, in my own journey, I have had to go through those times of being angry and expressing that to God. That's what it took for me to get to that point of trust and reliance. I couldn't bypass those feelings to get there. I had to express them and really feel them in order to then get into that full, deep trust and reliance. And that's something that I want to get into much deeper another time because I have a lot to go through here. So, if I didn't have a higher power to call out to and to lean on in my darkest moments where I felt like death was just a breath away, I honestly don't know how I would have survived. So maybe this concept is totally new to you, or maybe right now you don't have a good relationship with God, right? Maybe you're upset with Him, maybe you're angry with Him, maybe you're holding that resentment against Him. So I want to address this and share some concepts with you about how we can work through that. So as a Jewish woman, I'm going to be sharing some ideas with you from Jewish wisdom that can absolutely be applied universally. I won't be citing any direct sources, but these ideas are from a combination of Gemara, which is Talmud, Torah, Kabbalah, and other different ancient texts with ideas shared from different Jewish sages. So in Jewish tradition, we have our own calendar that goes by both lunar and solar cycles. Okay, so according to our lunar calendar, the last month of the year is called Elul. And the wisdom of the month of Elul really gives us a beautiful framework for how we can relate to God. So the Hebrew letters that spell Elul are Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed. And it is an acronym for a Hebrew phrase that goes, Ani ledodi v'dodi li, okay? Which means I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me. So the theme of the month of Elul is all about teshuvah, which means returning. A lot of people translate it as repentance, which repentance is actually just one facet of teshuvah. It's not the whole thing. Teshuvah itself means returning, and it is referring to returning to your source. So both your soul, your essence, and God, who we believe puts a piece of Himself into our soul. So the way to connect with God actually is not outside of ourselves, up there in the cosmos. It is within. It is inside our own bodies. And during Elul, we are meant to be taking an accounting of the last year. Where are the areas I messed up? What went well? What do I need to repent for? What do I need to fix or change, right? Kind of like an in-depth inventory to create resolutions for the coming year. And really the point is to consciously close the previous year so that we can enter into the new year with real presence and consciousness. And during Elul, we also have this concept of the king is in the field. And what that means is during this time, God is right here. He is in the field. He is available to us at all times for us to talk to pour our heart out to, and He's listening, right? God is like this king in His palace, but during this month, He is one of us in the field, communing with us. And really, he is available to us like this at all times, but there's an extra special presence in this time as both we and God are taking an accounting of the last year and then planning what's next for our destiny in the coming year. So when I think of the king is in the field, I picture coming to meet the king in his throne, right? And me getting into this submissive position before this king who loves and adores me as his queen, getting on my knees and pouring my heart out in full vulnerability and authenticity, being fully in my feminine, in all my feelings, allowing him to penetrate me, blasting me open emotionally to properly assess the last year, my own well-being, expressing my pains and desires, right? And another way that I picture this is when I think of the word field, my mind goes to my auric field or my energy field, right? That God has directly entered my personal field and he is here with me. And this can be really powerful to visualize because the way our auric field works is our aura extends about 6 to 8 feet outside of our bodies, and it contains 12 different layers broken up into 4 different categories, right? There's the emotional layers, the relational, the physical, and the spiritual. And when any trauma or heartbreak happens in our life, there are these injuries that puncture specific layers of our auric field, depending on which part was affected. And this is something I'm definitely going to elaborate on in depth in another episode, but stay with me here, okay? So these different injuries happen in different layers, and sometimes it punctures a full-on hole, right? And sometimes it just weakens or causes ridges. And it's through these injuries where we end up absorbing and taking on other people's energies, right? They can get in through these injuries. It's also where our energy can leak out, which is what can really leave us depleted. And in more extreme cases, can actually allow an entity to attach itself to us, essentially siphoning our energy, which is another thing we can get into in another episode. But anyways, all of this is totally healable, which brings me to my next point. God is directly in our field during this time. And as long as we do our due diligence and do teshuvah, right, which means acknowledging these hurt parts, these auric injuries, God is right there with us, patching up those holes and strengthening our field. But it takes 2. We have to put in the work and God will do the rest. And so back to Elul being an acronym for Ani Ladodi V'Dodi Li. As I mentioned, this phrase means I am to my beloved as my beloved is to me. And the idea is that the way we are meant to relate to God during this month, when we are taking this accounting, is in this way that He is the husband and we are the wife. Yes, even if you are a man, which maybe can be more difficult for you to imagine what that's like, but that's what it is. I am to my beloved as my beloved is to me. God is my husband. I am his wife. He is the masculine. I am the feminine. And Elul is referred to as a feminine month because this is the energy. Feminine energy is the moon. It is darkness. It is being able to look at our darkness and hold it and move it, and many of us, especially those who grew up in religious environments, have had this conditioning of God being this scary, punishing, mean God. But that is not God. And when we look at this relationship of him being a husband and we are the wife, well, let's look at what a healthy marriage between a husband and a wife should look like. At least in my humble opinion, okay? A wife needs to tell her husband what she wants, what she needs, what she desires, and it is his job to provide that for her. And by the way, if you're feeling triggered by all these traditional masculine and feminine roles I'm talking about here, that's okay, because there will be another episode where we will really get into the feminine and masculine energies and polarities, and we will break it all down further. But for now, just know that I'm not talking about any surface level masculine and feminine roles. I'm talking really about that deeper divine feminine and masculine energy, which is a thing that we all have and need to balance in order to live the best life possible. So we'll get into depth in that another time, but back to what we're talking about here. In a healthy marriage, a husband desires to provide for his wife all of her needs and desires. And God is there ready to hear and receive all of your desires and all of your concerns. Now, if you are angry with God, like I said before, if you're angry with God or you have a problem with him, many of us are conditioned that we are not allowed to express those feelings to him. But in a healthy marriage, with healthy communication, if your husband is not treating you right, or if he wronged you in some way, is it not your job as the wife to call his attention to it and demand better from him? And yes, there's a healthy way to do that, and there's also not healthy ways to do that. There's ways to communicate that he's actually going to be able to listen and take it. And there's also ways to communicate that he won't be able to take it. So that's also part of it, right? Another part of it is owning where we messed up as well. Maybe he has piled up resentments because we also weren't giving to him in the best way that he needs. And in a marriage, we are meant to bring out the best in each other. So that being said, we still have to do our own work, right? In this case, I'm referring to the work that needs to be done in the healing journey. But if your husband is wronging you, if you're dealing with illness or abuse or whatever the negative things are that are happening in your life that are negatively impacting you, you're going to say to him, this is not okay. In whatever that healthy communication is, this is not okay. I demand better. I deserve better than this. And I will do my part as much as I can to make everything better. But you, God, you need to do yours as well. I need you to meet me. This is what I need from you. This is my standard of how I need to be treated and cared for, right? It's enough of the pain and it's enough of the exile. I demand redemption and I demand to live in pure love and peace and harmony. I am your wife. I am your queen. How can you give me any less? And if you think of a healthy masculine king and his queen comes and says this to him, I just picture him smiling and saying back, of course, my love. You do your part and of course I'll do mine. Let's do it together, right? And I just want to put like a really big emphasis on our personal responsibility here, because if you are not doing your part, then you really don't have the right to come in and say that, right? You have to really, be open to even maybe I think I'm giving my all, but, show me the ways where I'm not. Like, let me make it known to me. Allow me to humble myself to be able to really see those areas that I have control of healing, changing, fixing about myself to align with my best me, right? Not just for the sake of them, but for myself. And that is ultimately really what we're talking about here, right? Because we're not actually talking about a marriage. We're talking about partnering with God in our life and our healing. So that's one concept. And another concept regarding our relationship with God is that of forgiveness. And here I'm talking about forgiving God. So when I first learned about this concept, it absolutely blew my mind. It had never occurred to me before that I need to forgive God for anything, because it never occurred to me that I was subconsciously storing up all this resentment against him, right? Resentment for the pain I personally experienced, resentment for the insane pains of the world that we see happening everywhere all the time, right? We don't need to pull out the laundry list of natural disasters and terrorism and evil plots being carried out all over the place, right? Innocent people suffering. Within that unwavering trust of God needs to come forgiveness. And there's also that concept of trust, of trusting that everything God does is for the good. And developing that trust really takes work. And really, the more that we hone it, the more peace we will have in our lives. And all the concepts I'm sharing with you are different ways of being able to build up that trust, right? Trust there is a purpose for this pain. And again, this is something that I will definitely talk more in depth about in another episode. And so part of getting there, right, is being able to forgive God for all of it, all of the different pains we hold against him. And if you're not there yet, that's okay. Remember that this is a journey. But hold this as one of your goals on this journey of your healing. And I'm not talking about forgiving terrorists or abusers. We're talking about forgiving God for the sake of being in partnership with him, developing a beautiful, trusting, loving relationship, as is ideal in a marriage with God, to be partners together in your healing. And again, if you're not there yet, that's okay, but understand how this is a needed foundation, and forgiveness is freedom. When we are not able to forgive, it doesn't affect the other person we can't forgive at all. It only affects us, and it imprisons us in our pain. Okay, so story time. I learned this deeply valuable lesson of forgiveness when I was able to forgive my father for the pain that he caused me. So my parents got divorced when I was 9 years old. My father struggled with bipolar disorder and addiction and was very verbally abusive, emotionally manipulative, narcissism, right? Caused me a lot of pain as a child. And for years, I would end my relationship with him, sometimes for 6 months, sometimes for 2 years. I would always try again and would always be disappointed again. And he was just extremely toxic to me. And we went years without speaking. And as an adult, after getting married, I was able to create the proper boundaries with him. And he finally began respecting them to the best of his ability. And as a young adult and as a young mother, I felt my only purpose in really having a relationship at that time was just out of like pure chesed, pure kindness to him. I didn't really want it, but he was in really bad health. He was alone. He made his own bed in that way. At least I could give him some joy by sending him pictures and videos of his grandchildren and sharing the joy of them with him. I really saw it as that was my role in the relationship. I still was not in a place where I really actually felt love towards him back then. And when my second child was born, she was about 2 months old and she smiled for the first time, and she has his exact smile. And in that moment, when she smiled for the first time, I was hit with a rude awakening that I was like, wow, I am still holding so much resentment and pain that I have managed to repress for the sake of peace. And I see that I am going to be triggered by my baby's smile. It's time to work on forgiving him so I can free myself of this pain, because I can't have my child's smile triggering me. Right? So I knew there was no way I could bring anything up with him. He wasn't capable of hearing things at that point. We lived in two different realities. And so this had to be an inside job, because he would never have had the capacity to own up to anything at that point. We were kind of working on this forgive and forget policy, just leave it all in the past, but it was still very much there. So this was actually my first, what they call the dark night of the soul. It was my first dark night of the soul. I've had about 3 of those so far. And I worked for a very long time, just allowing myself to, on my own, go through all of the pain, really process it all, and doing the work to just fully forgive him. And this was before my real deal healing journey. I didn't know anything about this stuff back then. It was very intuitive. It was just, I know that I had to face the pain. I just knew intuitively I had to feel it. I had to experience it in order to just let it go. I knew I had to go through it to get out of it. I knew there was no bypassing it, because I was aware of how much I was repressing and holding. And so I went on this journey, and then a miracle happened, a literal revealed miracle. So I mentioned before that my father was an addict, and when we would communicate through emails and texts, he was very incoherent forever. And I felt like I had to decode his messages, and it was always very hard for me to understand what he was even saying. And literally the moment that I was able to reach this point of real, true forgiveness, and again, without ever addressing him about it in any way, like magic, what felt like magic, he changed. He suddenly became super coherent, super clear. Not only that, he became this loving, doting, attentive father, asking me detailed questions about my life, offering insight and wisdom and love, whereas before everything was just very much about him. And it's like suddenly the narcissism just disappeared. And where he used to make himself a victim and very like, woe is me, he now didn't want to put any of his pain or problems on anyone else. It became hard for him to accept support. Like he actually became a real loving father for the first time. It was a miracle. I mean, this, from my perspective, his brain was fried from his addiction and he was not mentally okay. But after I truly forgave him, everything just changed. And so I know firsthand the absolute miracles that can happen as a result of forgiveness. And I have since understood the sheer power of it and have managed to forgive truly unforgivable things, and it definitely takes time and work to get there. And I just want to add, when I originally wrote this was a long time ago. I don't even remember when I wrote this exactly. Like I'm riffing off my notes here, but even since then, it's been many years since that happened. That forgiveness saga happened like 7 years ago as I'm recording this. And in the last 3 years, I've gone through a whole other dark night of the soul, a whole other, part of my healing journey. And I'm on an even newer level with my father of just his devotion as a father, how loving and doting he is and supportive, that I've actually went through this period where I did decide to confront him. I did get to this kind of round 2 of like resentments towards him coming up, because I got into this place in my healing journey where I became the woman that my inner child needed to defend her. And I got to this point where my inner teenager was screaming at me, "How can you have anything to do with him?" In her words that I heard, she was like, "You talked to him? Did he apologize? Are you kidding me?" And I mean, I had healed so many much more intense things at that point that it was like I had to do this for my inner child. And I felt horrible about it. I was like, "I'm so sorry I have to do this to you, but I have to bring up all this stuff." And he just took it. He just took it. And he's like, "If you need an apology, yeah, I'll apologize." It was a much longer conversation than that, of course, but just to give you a little piece of it. And, just to say that the miracle has continued to miracle. It's continued to get better and better and more beautiful in that way in our relationship. And I mean, I can't even tell you, I never ever in my life could have believed that this was ever possible. Where he was before versus where he is now. It's an absolute miracle from God, and this is the power of forgiveness. And so, again, as I said, it really takes time and it takes work to get there. And we'll never get to real forgiveness by bypassing our feelings. We have to feel and express the entirety of the repressed anger, the rage, the grief, the sadness, disgust, fear, whatever it is, right? We have to feel and express and discharge all of that energy in order to be able to get there. Forgetting and just leaving it in the past, it does not work. Contrary to popular belief, time does not heal any wounds, okay? It does not heal any of them. It actually just exacerbates them. So the work of forgiving God is crucial. Okay, so the next concept I want to share with you is a beautiful lesson in trusting God's presence with us at all times, especially when we can't feel it. So this comes from the story of Megillat Esther, the book of Esther, and it is the story from the Jewish holiday of Purim and the story that we are celebrating on that holiday. So just quick little overview of the story if you've never heard it before. It took place in Persia, which is modern day Iran. They had an evil king who took this young Jewish girl named Esther as his wife. And when she was the queen, she discovered that the viceroy to the king named Haman planned on killing all of the Jews who lived in the nation. And she made a plan using her brilliant feminine energy to get the king in her favor and then reveal to him the plan of Haman, and saved the Jewish people. And she risked her life every step of the way to do this, okay? Much more details. It's an incredible story. But now let's just get into the lesson that I want to share. So the Megillah, or the book, shares a lot of details of the political atmosphere of Persia, and the purpose of that is for us to really understand what Esther went through. Okay? It's not like she was this beloved queen and the king would do anything for her and it was easy. Okay? Absolutely not. That's kind of the kid version that's given to us when we're little kids. That's what it comes off as. But no. He was known as a very evil king, and it was an extremely corrupt society. The way that she even became queen was, first she was taken from her home forcefully and put into a harem for 1 year, okay? So imagine this sweet, quiet, modest Jewish little girl forcefully taken from her home, forced into prostitution because that's what a harem is, and then after a year there, the king decides he wants this girl to become his wife. Now, in this society, it is illegal for the queen to address the king without being summoned by him first. And the punishment for her going to speak to her husband first is death. So when it came time for her to enact this plan of saving the Jewish people, just by going to address him at all, she was risking her life. So it says in the Megillah, as she was walking towards his chamber to go address him, uninvited, risking her life, she walks through the Beis Hatzlamim, which is the corridor full of pagan deities. So if you're not Jewish, I'm absolutely not knocking any of this, but just know, for Jews, this is like totally forbidden, okay? We serve one God and one God only. We are monotheistic, and being in this kind of environment it's like the worst place for us. It's just awful for a sweet, young, modest Jewish girl that's who Esther was. So she's walking through this Beis Hatzlamim, risking her life, not knowing if she's going to come out of this alive, willingly risking her life, and she felt the Shekhinah, which is the divine feminine presence of God, leave her in that moment. She felt God completely leave her in that moment. And at the moment she felt the Shekhinah leave her, she declares this verse from Psalms, from Tehillim, that says, Keli, Keli, lama azavtani, my God, why have you abandoned me? So when I learned this story in depth from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, I'm going to include the link to his lecture in the show notes here if you want to listen to it, because it's amazing, especially if you are a survivor of sexual abuse. So when I first listened to this moment of this lecture, right away I recognized this moment in my own life. This is exactly what it felt like when I made the decision to face the pain of the sexual abuse that I experienced as a child. And I had to go into that darkness. When I made the decision to heal from it and to actually face that, because I didn't face that till I was in my 30s, that's what it felt like. It felt like I was entering this Beis Hatzlamim, not knowing if I was going to make it out alive, right? Letting myself go into this darkness, into this pain, into these triggers, into these memories, through all the flashbacks and reliving the torture of that experience. I didn't know if I was going to get stuck there, but I trusted and I knew that I would not stop the work on this journey. But it absolutely felt like whatever felt presence of God or Shekhinah I had before left me in those moments of being in those flashbacks and somatically tantruming the built up sympathetic energy of them out of my body. And so even though Esther felt like the Shekhinah left her, it never did. Because look at what happened. He didn't kill her, which is a miracle in and of itself. And not only did he not kill her, but she was successful. And she didn't have the conversation with him then. She was just starting the process of warming up to him, getting him to love her, so that when the time came, she could reveal the plan and hopefully he would take her side and kill Haman and save the Jews. And that's what happened. And she saved the entire Jewish nation. So again, even though she felt the Shekhinah leave her, it never did. Because it is always within, no matter what. And this is something we have to fully trust and believe when we allow ourselves to go into the darkness of our pain in order to resolve it. And same for me. I got to the end of my story. I completed that battle. I feel like I slayed freaking dragons on this healing journey. And I had my moment at the end feeling beaten and bloodied where I was able to then throw down my sword and begin my road to peace and acceptance and even forgiveness. And by the way, I'm not saying that sexual abuse survivors need to forgive their abusers. Absolutely not. But I will always be a stand for the fact that forgiveness is the highest level of healing because it frees you. It is not about the other person. It's not about giving them a free pass or letting them off the hook. It's not about that at all. It means freeing yourself, severing the pain from yourself. And that does not need to be your goal, okay? But just know that forgiveness equals true freedom for yourself. And if you so choose, that is a place you can get to. And this is something we can break down in another episode. So many things to break down in so many other episodes, right? But yeah, this is something we can break down about our soul choosing our life and path before we're born. That is actually something we're definitely going to discuss in another episode because I have too much to say about it. So moving on to the next concept is I want to share with you it's really piggybacking on the last one about how God's presence never leaves us because there is a piece of God embedded within our own soul. The fact of the matter is that you are a channel for God. You are a living, breathing vessel for His energy to flow through you at all times. You know, maybe you've had moments in your life where you felt it. Maybe there are moments you have felt it and didn't understand what you were feeling. Maybe you haven't yet built the capacity in your nervous system to experience this feeling and let it flow through you, all of which is okay. And, you know, in the spiritual world, the not Jewish spiritual world, this feeling is referred to as the Kundalini rising. So Kundalini is a representation of your own life force energy, which is located in the root and the sacral. So that's your pelvis area. And your life force energy is the same energy as your creative energy, your sexual energy, your sensual energy. That is all one in the same energy. It's all the same. It's all creation. Even ideas, projects, babies, it's all creative, it's sexual, it's one and the same, okay? And so the Kundalini rising is the image of your life force energy as a snake, as if it's like laying coiled in your pelvis. So it's the snake uncoiling and then rising up through all the central energy centers of the body, up and out, straight through the crown, which is the top of your head, up to God, up to source. And it's a beautiful, epic, powerful sensation, right? The way I experience it is these feelings of like tingling and chills and like godliness just envelops my entire being. It can even feel like a full body orgasm, right? Yet you're grounded and rooted and high at the same time. It's like this beautiful, powerful spiritual force. And by the way, the only reason I even mentioned Kundalini is in case you've heard that concept, so you can kind of just understand what I'm talking about, because it just gives a visual of the feeling. I don't subscribe to that belief system. I'm 100% just Torah based, but it's just an imagery that can kind of help for you to imagine it. And even for myself, I actually don't use the image of a snake because I don't like snakes. So I actually like to envision mine as a beautiful, flowy, feminine ribbon. Okay. And a dear friend of mine who is an amazing energy reader, super gifted. She actually told me once in an energy session that she did for me one time that she saw my Kundalini as a ribbon. And I was like, oh, I love that, because I never vibed with the image of a snake. And at that time, I had just started that work of connecting and honing my divine feminine energy. And after my whole life of being in my masculine, right? And it felt so special and beautiful and validating that that's what she saw. And I was like, okay, I'm running with that. I'm using the ribbon visual. And by the way, with energy, a lot of it has to do with visualization. So there are no rules. You got to visualize what resonates most and feels most authentic to you. Now, the healing journey can really be summed up as a process of meeting our painful or traumatized parts one at a time, working with that part, and eventually experiencing a somatic emotional release of the energy of that pain, which previously was creating an emotional blockage in our energetic field and in the energy centers of the body. So until we have that release, there is a blockage, okay? And we are not able to be a pure open channel for God with these energetic blockages. Doesn't mean we can't access Him, but it means that we are just not yet a pure open channel. There are roadblocks all over the place. So each pain we heal and release clears that blockage, creating the space for God to reside within us. And then we get to experience more often and more easily the felt sensation of God. And without being imprisoned by the ego, we can let God in more and more. So all of this is to say that you are a channel for God, for the divine. And the more we remove our blockages, the more we clear our channel, creating more space and more access to this beautiful divine flow. Okay. And now the last concept I will leave you with that will help develop this deeper connection with the source of all things is that there is no such thing as coincidence. There are so many moments in our lives that we can chalk up to be coincidence, right? So I'm sure it's happened to you in your life where you're like, wow, what a coincidence, right? Honestly, when I hear people say that, I want to give them a shake and yell, how do you not see the work of God here, okay? Everything that you see and witness and hear in your life is designed specifically for you. Even the negative stuff. You witnessed something negative you wish you didn't see. Guess what? That was for you. It was another opportunity for growth. We are put on this earth with the purpose to refine ourselves, and we are given endless opportunities to refine, to fix, and heal. And when we see coincidences happening, they are not coincidences. They are actually synchronicities. You're witnessing God in action, okay? Someone pops out of the blue to give you something you needed in that moment, whether it's a friend or a loved one or even a stranger. That is not the person. That is God working through that person, okay? We are vessels. We are channels. Vessels and channels for the divine flow. God works through us. So start to change your language. When you see a coincidence, say, wow, God, I see you. I see how you work in the most beautiful synchronicities. And by the way, if at any time you experience chills when you hear me or anyone else saying something inspiring that hits you deep and that resonates, feel into that physical sensation for a moment. Those chills, those tingles, that is God. That is the divine flow. That is what people call Kundalini rising. That is your soul, your essence waking up at having heard truth. That is your intuition. And those are the feelings you follow throughout your healing journey and throughout your life. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. And I just want to leave you with the key takeaways from today's episode. 1, the most important key in healing is developing a real relationship with God, not a theoretical one, a lived, intimate, ongoing relationship. 2, trusting God is work. It doesn't always come easily, but when we build it intentionally, it makes life and the healing journey so much lighter and more supported. 3, God loves us and wants us to bring all of ourselves to Him, even our anger, confusion, disappointment, and grief. Honest, direct communication is what creates intimacy in any relationship, including this one. 4, we can use the framework of a healthy marriage to understand our relationship with God: communication, trust, responsibility, repair, and presence. And just like any healthy relationship, it takes 2. We can't bypass our own responsibility. Our healing requires us to show up, do our part, and stay engaged. 5, God is not somewhere outside of us. He is within us. 6, we're invited to look honestly at where we may be holding resentments towards God and to begin the work of forgiveness. That forgiveness creates freedom, it deepens trust, and it opens the door to profound shifts. 7, forgiveness is an inside job and it brings miracles into our lives. 8, even in the darkest moments when it feels like God has abandoned us, He never has. He never does. He is always within us. 9, each of us is a channel for God, and the more we heal and clear energetic and emotional blockages, the more clearly that channel can flow. 10, there is no such thing as coincidence. There are only synchronicities. 11, nothing happens to you. Everything that happens in your life is happening for you, perfectly orchestrated and synchronized by God for a purpose. Thank you again so much for being here. And if this episode resonated, if something softened or clicked or helped you feel even just a little bit more at home in your body, I would be so grateful if you supported the podcast by liking, following, subscribing, or leaving a 5-star review. These simple actions really make a big difference because they help this work reach the people who are searching for it, and often at exactly the right moment. And feel free to also share with your friends and your family members if you feel like it would resonate for them. And if you are feeling called to deepen this work beyond listening, I want to invite you into the Somatic Healing Foundation's membership. Inside, you will find self-paced masterclasses and workshops, along with a rich library of guided meditations, nervous system regulation tools, somatic practices, and gentle challenges that are designed to support deep healing without force and without overwhelm, helping you to really reconnect to your body's signals, soften long-held tension, and really build a felt sense of safety and trust that changes everything else naturally. And it's not about fixing yourself. It's really just about learning how to work with your nervous system, listen to your body's wisdom, and support your healing in a way that feels sustainable, grounded, and honest. And as a thank you for being a podcast listener, you can use the code PODCAST at checkout to join us for just $33 a month. You will find the link and details in the show notes here. So thank you again for being here, for doing this work, and for choosing yourself in ways that may feel small but are deeply powerful. I'll see you in the next episode.